It's a little like learning how to swim by reading all the textbooks that there are on swimming. Until you get in the pool, until you let go of the walls and you start moving your body according to what you learned, you won't really get swimming. Welcome to today's live stream. We are talking all about why high achievers tend to stay stuck and what to do about it instead. Good morning, good morning. Okay, so let's hop into it. The thing is that I started this business helping a lot of experts and coaches and entrepreneurs to have a better time of building a business because quite honestly, I was having a really hard time myself. You know, I had these standards that were just so high, and I'm not suggesting in any way that you should not have high standards, but here's where the issue was. I had these very high standards for new things that I wasn't good at yet because I had zero exposure to them. But I looked at them and I asked myself, well, how hard can it be? Which is awesome in some ways, because if you can ask yourself how hard can it be, then you can get started with it. But truly, the actual capability of being good at that thing, it did require training, it did require intention setting, it did require practice, and I took it very personally when I wasn't immediately good at stuff, right? It is so hard to suck at first with new things. And I think especially because I was really proud of the past career. So if we're new together, what I did for my first half, which is so funny because now I'm like, oh my God, it's almost half now. The first half of my career was working for a very big corporate consulting company as a strategy consultant. And I did so well there. I mean, and my expectations as a kid from the Arctic in Canada were like, they're going to find me out. They're going to find out that I'm actually no good. They're going to find out. They're going to find out. That was like one of the biggest things in my head was like, they're going to find out. But I worked really hard. I was super receptive to here's how we do things. So I think my bosses really loved that because they could just be like, here's how we do things. I'd be like, okay. And I'd go do it. And it led to a lot more opportunity because I was really receptive to doing like the new thing. However, when I started doing the individual entrepreneurial business where I started as a solopreneur, I actually actively hate that term, solopreneur, but that's how like a lot of businesses actually start is you're the only one, right? I would say get out of that as soon as possible, not to take on partners before you should or hire people before you should, but like it should be, in my opinion, an active goal to build something bigger than yourself. And so all of that to say, in the solopreneur realm, I was really struggling with time management. I was really struggling with knowing what to prioritize, what to do. I was really struggling with how to do it well from a public facing perspective as opposed to the private, like the culture inside the community that I worked in, the culture inside the company that I worked in. There was very, clear, this is how we do things. The culture was incredibly strong. So when I went out into the big wide world, I didn't have the same structure. I didn't have the same rules all the time. So it was a big struggle. And I share this with you because I know that my expectation for the longest time is I should already be good at the next thing because I was good at the thing before. And that sucking feeling, like Shelly was saying, it does suck. But it's also so super important to recognize that that is a feeling, not a fact. That's a feeling, not a fact. You cannot change your reality if you do not accept it. You might write that one down. You cannot change your reality if you cannot accept it. And what changed everything for me was learning to accept, like, wow, I actually kind of do suck at sales. And I also don't know how to do direct response copy or brand building copy or creating content online. I didn't know how to have camera presence. I didn't know how to stage my office. I didn't know how, what topics to discuss. There was like, the things I did not know. But here's the truth. You can figure them out. Right? You can figure them out because the thing that made you so good at the other thing, there was a time And it's so easy to forget this. There was a time you sucked at that too. There was a time in my consulting career where I was just like so freaking lost. Like I said, I was just panicked they were going to find me out as being this kid from the sticks. And it was the same thing when I went to university. I got an engineering degree. The first, few weeks of that, I was terrified that I just didn't belong there. And now what I realize several moons into this whole journey is that's how beginnings feel. You're not an imposter. You don't have imposter syndrome. In fact, there's no such thing as imposter syndrome. What you're feeling is you're feeling nerves and doubts about a new thing because your body and your mind have never experienced it before, which makes it perfectly normal. It's perfectly normal to feel like the odd duck and the odd one out and the weirdo. That's normal, right? It actually makes you not weird, which is sort of fun to think about, right? Yeah, you have to create your structure. That's exactly the answer to that dilemma. You have to create your structure. Let's just say, for example, though, that you're like me and you took a bunch of courses that taught you the structure. Is that a fair assessment, right? So shout a Y in the chat if you've been taught a structure on how to market, a structure on how to sell, a structure on how to have presence, a structure on how to deliver your sessions. Like, you actually have quite a bit of training on exactly what to do. So today I want to talk to you about why you ain't doing it. Woo! It's Monday. It's the first Monday in January 2026. We're going to talk about why you're not doing the damn thing, even if you know what to do. And I'm going to give you like the classic examples for why. Why don't we do what we know to do? Great question. Here's the answer. One of the biggest reasons is because you tend to overfunction. You tend to overfunction. So what's overfunctioning? We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about when your capability actually becomes a bottleneck. Because one of the beliefs that we have to shift is this idea of solopreneurship, that you are supposed to do everything all by yourself all the time. And, what I found is most people believe, at least on a level, that they need to do everything by themselves all at once, right now, perfectly. Right? Let me know in the chat if you've ever had that frustration that you can't do everything all at once by yourself perfectly right now. Right? That's classic overfunctioning. That's what overfunctioning actually feels like. And the big T truth of it is that you have amazing, incredible capability. You are actually incredibly. Do you realize how rare it is for people to continue to pursue their education? Right? You're like already in a 1% category with that. Because most people, did you know that most Americans, even college educated Americans, don't read more than one book a year? Did you know that? So you're already functioning at a very different level just by virtue of the fact that you're enrolling in courses, you're taking programs, you're doing the steps. It's wild to realize just how low the bar actually is. And so when we start putting pressure on ourselves about how we're not doing everything all at once perfectly right now, and also in advance, what that is that's simply a pattern. It's a learned pattern. And so, I'm telling you some truths on a Monday, and I hope that this is okay because we're going to talk about your hero habit. Your hero habit. And it's this tendency to save everyone around you, but it actually stalls your growth. So I know as a coach, I actually just read this over the weekend. We had an anonymous post inside the Coaching Conversation Facebook group that we have, the free group. And this individual was really struggling, to get their business to work. And they said something in the comments that I thought was just so telling for why they are where they are. And where they are, by the way, is they're super struggling with income. They had to move back in with their parents. They have health challenges and they need to pay for it. Like it's a tough thing. Like I have a lot of empathy for that person and their situation. There was a belief in there that they said in the comments that I was like, it's hero syndrome. And what they said, the thing that's hard about coaching is that you've got to make everybody believe that you're more successful than you are. Literally said that. And I'm grateful that they said it because I was like, oh my God, I got to talk about this on Monday because no, you don't. You do not have to pretend to be more successful than you are. You don't have to put on airs. You don't have to be anything but exactly what you actually really are. Now, here's the rub. Most people, not just coaches, they are shitty to themselves. They are really, really negative. They have a negative self-talk. They have a negative self-concept. They have a negative way that they evaluate themselves. And it's because of our negativity bias, right? There's a bias in our mind where we look for the faults, the problems, the scary bits, and like all things being equal, we tend to pick the negative thing. Just because you have the bias, though, doesn't mean you need to play into it, right? It's a bias. So what's more realistic? What's a more realistic picture of who you are and what you are? That is what you represent, is the realistic picture of who you are and what you are. And I just said, you are someone who studies. You are someone who enrolls in programs and doesn't try to figure things out all by themselves all the time. You're someone who can prioritize. You're someone who believes in something bigger and better for yourself. My God, showcase those things. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't matter what your bank account balance is. It doesn't matter if you've got health conditions. It doesn't matter if you're neurodivergent or you have some other thing about you that makes you weird. It's like, no, it's just where you are and in some cases who you are and it's all good. Here are the 3 things that actually help you sell expert businesses. It is sparking conversations and getting attention. It is having the conversation, talking to people, right? And as soon as you can figure it out, do one-to-many conversations. Why? Well, because the more conversations that you're having, like right now, I'm simultaneously having a conversation with like 10 people, right? And like that might not sound like amazing. It is amazing. It's incredible. Like if I had 10 people in my living room, y'all wouldn't have a seat. You know what I'm saying? If you're having the right conversation with people, that's 10 people. Well, some of those people are my clients. Some of those people aren't my clients yet, right? And it's through these conversations that help people to decide, do I even like you? Do I believe that you can help me? Do I think that being in relationship with you in a deeper way, in a more consistent way would actually help, right? Where do we make that assessment? The answer, my friend, is in the conversation that you're having. So this is the conversations in your social content. This is the conversations in your live streams, which I recommend you do every single week. This is the conversations in your bigger webinars, which I also recommend that you do, that are a little more, a little more prepared and a bigger deal about them. Like all of those are simply conversations, but there's a third piece you need to have. And the third piece is you need an invitation and an offer. You need something that you can invite people to do, because without the invitation, there is no party. Without the invitation, there is no party. So you've got to be the one that decides what you're going to invite people to. And you got to think about what makes that such a great decision for them, right? That's called an offer. So we've got attention, conversation, and offer. And then, of course, you've got to do a good job when you fulfill. So that means showing up. That means doing the thing. That means being on time. That means being reliable. That means having the lead up and the follow through on whatever it is that you're delivering, so that the person walks away from that experience going, holy cow, I'm glad I made the investment. That's the goal. That's what a coaching business is. Please note, I did not mention anything about your marital status. I didn't mention anything about your age. I didn't mention anything about how you pray. I didn't mention anything about how you vote. I didn't mention anything about the mistakes you've made in your past. I didn't mention anything about the trauma you might be working through with your therapist. I didn't talk about your family. Do you hear what I did not talk about in that process, right? And because of this hero syndrome, what people do is they're like, well, I'm not already perfect enough and I don't like myself, so why would you like me? That's what it's about. And I think like this pressure to always be a hero, it can cause some serious mental health challenge, because you're not being real. And you're not being real with yourself. You're not being real in your relationships, right? And being real does not mean hyper emphasizing all the negative bits about you. It means even real, right? And it doesn't even have to have equal representation, because you know what? If you've done something really incredible, then that deserves airtime. That deserves to be talked about. Do things that are incredible and amazing, And then people will be like, oh, wow, that's incredible and amazing. But you don't have to pretend that you are more credible and amazing than you actually are. Just be exactly who and what you are and where you are. Meet yourself where you are. Because what do you think you want your clients to do? I said it earlier. You cannot change your reality if you do not accept what your reality is. If you do not accept that your bank account is leaving you in tears, if you do not accept that you are working too many hours with too little output, if you don't accept that you're not getting the opportunities that you want to get, if you don't accept those things, then you will never build a plan or an intervention or a commitment to change those things, right? Shout out real in the chat if you're hearing me so loud this Monday about how it's so important to let go of this idea that you have to be the hero, you have to be so perfect, you have to have everything all figured out, and also ideally erase every negative thing that ever happened in your past. Wow, the pressure. Wow, the pressure, right? Like, of course you shouldn't do that. So what do you do instead? Well, a lot of high achievers, straight up, you just need to stop doing a lot of the things that you're doing. Like so many of the things that you're doing. So I was talking to a client last week about changing providers for systems. Like they know that there's a great system that would work really well for them, that they can handle in their budget, that they can handle in their capability. But because they made decisions in the past about hiring other people and things like that, they felt like this major sunk cost that they had to keep going in this other direction that would require them to learn more complicated technology, to manage multiple different technologies, and the expense of having to hire other people if they can't do it themselves was really high. And so we had this whole conversation, and what they arrived at is that they deserved to make a decision now that was clear now, that was going to help them now, that involved letting go of a past decision, right? This whole idea that you have to do everything by yourself all at once, right away, with no help at all, that is such a limiting belief. That is your ego on steroids, because you're scared of the rejection from other people, the judgment from other people for making a change. We haven't even talked about that. High achievers don't make change because they're scared other people are going to have an opinion about it that doesn't put them in a positive light. And I know what that's like. I mean, when I was running my business a lot hotter, with a lot more ad spend and a lot more pressure on the sales team, I was scared to change the model back to something that I knew actually worked well, because I was scared that it would look like my business wasn't as successful as other businesses that had bigger teams. I wasn't getting away from delegating. I was right-sizing for the cash flow realities and for what the customer journey is generally like for my customer. And the thing that got in the way was this belief that I had to force fit an old method, an old system that just wasn't working. And you know what's crazy is the people who pushed that model with me ended up closing their business altogether, right? And I had to see that writing on the wall to realize that the recommendation was coming from a place of success in a period, but it wasn't coming from a place of sustainability, which was a thing that I definitely wanted. So when you're making decisions as a high achiever, it can be so tough, because when you're delegating, you might feel like you have to hire that person forever, or you have to stick with that system forever, or you've got to do that thing forever. So you build this forever right, or this forever stuck feeling into your decisions. Y'all tracking this? So it stops you from delegating because you're like, well, I don't want to ever fire somebody. It stops you from getting the right system because you're like, well, I don't want to ever go through the difficulty of shifting systems. You don't change your message because you don't ever want people to think you're fickle, right? And those are three of the biggest things that high achieving experts have to do differently in order to get a new and different result. Again, if you want change, it involves change. And so overfunctioning and trying to be like way anticipatory of this distant future is such an exercise in futility. It's absolutely impossible to do, but a lot of people try to do that. So what do we do instead? Well, instead of being the one all the time that does everything perfectly all at once right away, what if you shifted from being obsessed with doing and you shifted it to designing? Now, there has to be action taken, obviously, but there's undesigned action taken, which is reactive, it's reactionary, it's impulsive, it follows your feelings, it doesn't follow your data, right? And then there's designed action taking, as in showing up on purpose, doing a thing you intended to do. Now, this is where people get really, really like their overfunctioning brain like can really throw you off. So I'm gonna spell this one out. You will not want to take action because you're going to be scared that you are not taking the right one. Right? Who's ever felt that where you are scared you're going to make the wrong decision and you'll waste resources, you'll waste money, you'll waste time, you'll have to pivot and you'll be embarrassed from the pivot. Is this ringing any bells? Right? Yeah. Okay. Here's the truth. You might screw up. You might actually make a mistake. In fact, I have a pretty high confidence you will screw up. You're going to trust the wrong person. You're going to buy the wrong software. You're going to pick the wrong market. You're going to have the wrong offer. You're going to say the wrong thing. You're going to prioritize the wrong stuff. You know what? You're going to do that with 100% certainty. Why? Because you had never done it before, right? You've been learning, it's a little like learning how to swim by reading all the textbooks that there are on swimming. Until you get in the pool, until you let go of the walls and you start moving your body according to what you learned, you won't really get swimming. And I think for a lot of us, the fear in the decision of making a wrong decision, it's reinforced crazy heavy by our society, possibly by your upbringing, like lots of messages that are like, thou shalt never F up, right? Never make a mistake, never be seen to be imperfect. And especially in our current society, it is so easy to be a keyboard warrior. You know what I'm talking about? Like those people that have a friggin' opinion on everything. And they've got like big words to reinforce their dumbass opinions. And they can sit there not creating a damn thing and just criticizing. It is the easiest thing in the world to do that. But you know what? Those people will never create an impact that makes somebody actually feel good. That's the truth. You're so scared of their criticism. Well, it's easy to criticize. And you get like this dopamine hit of a little bit of attention when you do it. But they're never going to feel the pride of actually creating something, of taking a chance on something, right? They're not going to get to feel the art of what they do and the creation, but you cannot create without criticism, because if you create something that nobody ever sees, the reason why no one ever sees your offer, nobody ever sees your presentation, nobody ever sees your point of view, the reason that that's happening is because there's actually the biggest critic of all blocking it, right? And it's you. It's you. You're the biggest critic of all. Whether you're a keyboard warrior that is tearing other people down or not, if you're tearing yourself down, if you're tearing your perspective down, if you're tearing your intention down, if you are tearing down your motives for why you're doing the thing, you will never release the thing into the world, and you will never learn what resonates and what feels good for real versus hypothesis. Smart people are real dumbasses about this. Okay? Smart people are really stupid about over-analyzing, over-functioning, and overthinking about what they're creating. And they're missing all of the amazing opportunity to get reactions from people, right? Hello, Happy New Year. We're celebrating some things. I'm getting 5-second wins over here on Instagram. I'd love to see some in Clients Over Chaos. Happy New Year. Jessica did her first Facebook Live event yesterday. Like, y'all are getting into the weeds and doing the thing. Less time journaling about it. I'm all for a journaling practice, but if your journaling practice takes more than 20 minutes in a day, too much. Too much. You are over functioning in your personal development. You need to have more time designing. Here's my priorities. I'm going to execute these priorities. I'm selecting these priorities because reason 1, reason 2, reason 3. Most people live in reaction. So they're like, I'm going to do it because, well, it's something to do, or, well, I don't know what else to do. And let me ask you this. Is that really a smart thing to just be in reaction and to be like, well, I can't think of anything else. I'm totally overwhelmed. No, right? Take the beat, take the pause, say, I'm going to do this because. Give yourself 3 good reasons why you're going to do this thing first, and that thing second, and the next thing third. Design what it is that you're doing, because your success is in your sequencing. It's not in just being suddenly automatically perfect, right? So, okay, let's really bring this home with something I call the CEO filter. So the CEO filter is when you are shifting your mindset from being just a doer, a coach, right? A helper, helping hand, to the steward of a business entity. You know what's so funny is I actually think of it a little like parenting, So as a mother, there's things that my sons are allowed to do and not allowed to do, right? Why? Because it's my job to steward their growth and their development. There's shows they're not allowed to watch. There's screen time they're not allowed to have. There's food they're not allowed to eat. But there's also a lot of things that I put into their life and enrich their life so that they have a good foundation for when they become an adult. Is this tracking and making sense? Shout a Y in the chat if that's tracking and making sense. When you're the CEO, it's like you're the mother of your business. You need to steward and protect it from doing dumbass things, like being taken advantage of, or not having monitoring of your cash flow, or having somebody partner with you but not really add any value to the entity, right? So it's a lot like parenting, right? I won't let my sons hang out with loser friends, right? So it's the same thing with my business. I won't let people contribute to my business who have not proven that they are worthy of the contribution, right? I have very high standards for who I invite into the business. That's both clients, collaborators, suppliers, like all the things. I steward that. I'm like a mother for the business. The other way that being a CEO is very much like a mother is because I'm nurturing, I'm developing. So like I have my kids doing particular correspondence learning. I didn't just say, well, you live here and you're going to go to that school over there because of proximity, right? I was like, no, we're going to educate. And this was, of course, in partnership with my husband. So there's another lesson there. He's also my business partner. But we had the whole conversation about where do we want our kids to be prepared? What do we want them to be prepared for? How do the different options that we have available compare? And we selected an option that was going to provide the best opportunity for growth with our current resources. Right? Shout out mom in the chat if you're kind of loving this analogy. It just came to me. But I think the other thing, like as a mother, is that I make sure that my business is not just like keeping itself busy and not on autopilot. I'm invested in its growth. I want it to be bigger and better than it is today. Right? That's a desire that I have. So there's a responsibility that we have. Right? And it's not just, I think there's definitely some societal images of mothers that are just, constantly serving their kids and never challenging their kids and, kind of doing that helicopter thing. And just what kind of kid do you wind up with? Right? You wind up with the whiny, spoiled, ineffective child that cannot independently thrive. So a level of challenge is required, but the right level of challenge that meets the individual child where it's at. It's the same thing in business. Some of you are expecting so much of your business child, but you have also not given it the opportunity. You haven't given it the education that it requires or the support system that it needs to be able to perform at that level. If you have given it those things though, and you're not challenging it to perform at that level, then you're not really any better off. So yeah, I would say that, one filter is definitely CEO. And if you're like me and I'm like, I've never been a CEO before, what's that like? I'm like, well, I've been a mom. I've been CEO of my family. And actually it makes a ton of sense. Like it's the same kind of leadership, stewardship principles that are in play. And, speaking frankly as a mother, I made mistakes. I have. I'm not perfect. And I hope it's safe to say that in this environment. I've changed my parenting style. I've got 4 kids. One of them is headed off to college. She had a very different version of me as a mother than my youngest at 8 years old has, right? Because I've figured out some things. Your business is actually the exact same way. So when my business was, let's call it 2 years old, my being and how I was with my business was really different than my business working on my 9th year. Does that make sense? So you as a leader evolve as you go along, and that CEO frame or filter, it's very much like the mom filter of like, how can I do this even better? How can I do this? Here's where I want to end today. Y'all, if that was not a demonstration of not being perfect, let be the enemy of the good, like just give me a little Y in the chat. Like I've dropped stuff on live streams and here we are still in business 9 years later. When I was like at year 2, I would have been like, oh my God. And I would have launched into this horrible apology thing that would make you cringe, right? Be who you are, be really real. And so all of this to say, you've probably at this point in your life built a lot of success through being dependable. But if you don't let go of the old expectations, the old paradigms, the old processes, the old time allocations, you yourself become the ceiling on your growth. And like I said, smart people do dumb stuff all the time, meaning that we all have really the same brain in a lot of sense in terms of how it works. And we tend to optimize for less effort, less thinking, less uncertainty, right? And you need to be able to steward through all of those things as an entrepreneur. So the next level of your growth requires you to lead through others. And even if you consider yourself a solopreneur, I hate that term so much, a solopreneur at this point in your journey, the radical truth of it is that you're never alone. In business, if you are alone, if you're like working alone in your business and you interact with no other people, you're doing it wrong, right? It's all about that additional connection. I just threw my Instagram like on the floor. It was awful. It was, my husband just came in and I had to tell him immediately. So let's try this to implement some of the things that we've talked about today. Just look at your calendar this week, right? Print it out if you want. And highlight every task that you feel like someone else or something else, like maybe a virtual assistant or a system, could handle at least 80% as well as you could. And you want to just start off by handing those things off. The biggest time sinks should probably go first, or the most tedious time sinks should probably go first. So if this episode spoke to you, make sure you're sharing it with another high achiever. I go live every Monday at 9 a.m. and you can send them to next5clients.com and it'll direct them right to the Clients Over Chaos community where they will get the replay of this episode, which of course you're welcome to look at as well. And that's the best thing to do is just send them to next5clients.com. Now, this year, we are going to be shifting some of our, we're staying here at 9, just so I'll start there. But we're shifting some of our content to share with you what we've developed over the last 2 years to support our business with